All right. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Raw Talks where we have candid conversations with fearless women. Today is our best friend, Jacqueline Way, joining us all the way from the beautiful Vancouver. And everybody has heard about her Give One Day, and everybody has been participating in it one way or the other. If not, let hit any of us out on four of us on the camera, hit any of us, and we will give you all the details that you need for the 365 do one give. It is a beautiful initiative that Jackie you've started, and we are also honored to join you in that. It is a pleasure to have you here with us today, and we would love to hear more from you about we are going to talk about the correlation between self-worth and fearlessness, and that itself is something that's so juicy. I can't wait to dive in.
It is so juicy. I think it's so juicy for everybody on this planet because I think everybody gets stuck in their fear.
Yeah.
And fear really is that place of our worth. It's which comes first, your self-worth or fear, or does fear come first? And that correlates to your self-worth. And they're so intertwined with each other that when we can start to understand that and work through it, which you talk about all the time, Falguni, and in the work and the practice you do, is the moment you start to feel free in your life, and they hold us back. So they're perfectly intertwined, the two things.
Yes, absolutely. And joining us here today are Caren and Linda as well. Hello, ladies. And we would love to hear, Jackie, a little bit about your background. What inspired the 365 Do One Give? Just we had to ask that question because you're all about that, and your famous TED talk was on the same topic. So we really would love to hear a little bit of background on that, and then we'll dive right into the topic of self-worth and fearlessness.
Well, it's kind of the perfect topic that ties into it because 365 Give, it started as a personal parenting project with my son, and fear had a lot to do with it because when I adopted my first son, when I looked out into the world and looked at the world and go, oh my God, what am I bringing my child into? That's fear-based, but it motivated me, that fear of, the world in so many ways. And from whether you want to talk about climate change or war or hunger or famine or any of the other, million things that are going on, it was actually that fear of my son's future moved me forward to start the 365 Give movement. And it really started as just a parenting project with my son to change the world. One give, one day at a time. And we all say it had to be so simple, a 3-year-old could do it. And today that project has blossomed into a worldwide global giving movement where we teach people how to give, because people talk about fear. People are scared of giving. It's their excuse. I don't have anything to give. And we're that organization that we believe everybody has something to give. We believe it's actually part of every human being's DNA, because we all can give a smile. We can give love to another person. We can pick up garbage. We can help an animal on the street. It's not about money. It's about the actions that come from your heart, from a place of love, not a place of fear. And I truly have a belief that, that every human being is our untapped resource to changing our world's greatest problems. Because if we all came together, we all did small things every day that came from our heart, from a place of love, the whole world would change, because we would be coming from a place of enough, that we have enough to give. But it's the perfect topic that comes back to what we're talking about. Is so many people come from that place of lack, that I don't have enough, that I don't have anything to give. But it's really the opposite, that when you're full yourself and you love yourself, you overflow that to others. And then you have an abundance to give in your life. And that can, whether it's volunteer time or it's the little things every day, but you have to come from that place of enough before you can give. And I'll be really honest with everybody. When I started this with my son, I actually started it as a blog, as a way of just sharing it with family and friends. My little hidden secret is that my goal was to change the world, but I had no idea how to do it. So I just thought I'd start small. And if you actually go back and read my first couple of blog posts before I actually started giving every day with him, it talks about exactly that fear, and how to get it. I had to get over the fear. For my life, I have said, I'm not a writer. I'm not a highly educated person. I didn't go to university. I'm one of those street smart people that just learned as I went along. And, I had to get over the fear of not being good enough to do this, that nobody would ever read what I wrote. And nobody would possibly join me in changing the world. And I had to get over that. And so for me, it was that my son inspired me. I wasn't doing this really for the world. I was doing it for my son. And so I had to take that step. I had to take that step to get over my fear. And the more I stepped, and every step I took, and every time I wrote, I had to write for 365 days straight. And that took me to a place of, I'm not sure I still believed I was a writer, but at least I knew I could do it. Even if it wasn't perfect, it was okay, and it was enough. And that started us on a journey that's now spanned over almost 10 years. I had a couple of kids in between, so I took a little time off. But it has spanned over almost 10 years now, and it became who I was, or it shouldn't say became who I was. I stepped into more of who I was, who I truly was. And that was the beauty of that journey, is that I had to take that first step over my fear to get me going. And then the fear keeps coming up all through your life. It's great. So, but the beautiful thing about it is, and it always shocks and amazes me, is that we are still going, and we grow every day, and people reach out to me, and I have this beautiful opportunity to talk to people like you on topics I never thought I would talk about. And, how fabulous is that? Like, what a gift.
It's very fabulous, Jacqueline. And I'm so glad that you're sharing this, because I've spoken to a number of people who thought that they didn't have that thing that they could bring to the world because they weren't that leading expert with that title, with that experience. And I always push back when anyone tells me that, because you as a person, as an individual, have that power. You know what you're going to live in your life. And with that passion that you have, that's your license to be able to go forth and do these things. And by setting the stage, by being that person to step forward, then think about all the people you're impacting and encouraging by taking that risk and doing that. And so I need more people like you to share that, because there's so many people that will hold back until someone can give them that permission. And so,
well, you want somebody to hold your hand, right? You want like a team of people around you to support you, and all of those things. And listen, I still have days like that. That doesn't go away from me. I think that every time, it's like this conversation today, and I said this earlier, when you have to have conversations like this, it's exactly what you need to be listening to for yourself, because whatever you're putting out internally to the world, you're getting back externally. And I don't care what you want to call it, law of attraction, whatever works for you, but if you just take the time to actually see what's coming up in your life, you'll see exactly what you need to take the time to, whether it's learn for yourself or dig a little deeper and really ask yourself what's going on. And this is now 3 times for me today it has come up. So there's definitely a lesson for me in this.
Well,
so somebody take notes, like we're recording this, because I got to go back and listen and see what I can learn.
Exactly. That's so true. But to the point of the fear, right? Because we talk about fear and self-worth, and it does kind of intertwine, I feel like, because I feel like when you don't feel good about yourself, for whatever reason it may be, it doesn't matter, it could be trauma, but whatever the reason is, your self-worth is low.
We can put it on so many things. Yeah.
I mean, really, it could be like a big time. But you know what I mean? So when your self-worth is low, I speak from experience, so I could attest to this. But like when your self-worth is low, that fear rises deeply, because you don't think you can do it, because you don't think highly of yourself. So you won't give this, because you don't think, giving a compliment can really change somebody's day. Talking about the do one give. We're coming from the place of lack, because we feel like we're not worth something. whatever that worth may be, you know what I mean? So therefore we're coming from that place of lack. We're coming from that, well, what do I have to give? So like would you agree that self-worth comes before fear, or is it like just equal in that sense in a way?
You know, if we were to go back, and you know, Falguni will be able to talk on this so well because of her NLP work that she does as well. You know, I always think that when we're born, we don't come from a place of lack. We don't come from a place of not being worth it. We learn that. We learn it from the world around you. So really it starts as a child that, you know, it's going to depend on the family you grow up in. It depends on the culture you grow up in. It depends in the part of the world that you grow up in and what you're exposed to. And what science tells us is that what you learn between about the ages of 0 and 6 is going to have the biggest impact on your life in general. So when we come bouncing out of our mother's womb, except for some exceptions, I have a couple of exceptions to that rule. And even sometimes before, because if your birth mother, and your mother, I use the term birth mother because it has to be the place you came out of. If they lived or were in a very bad place themselves, a place where they were living in fear and stress, that gets transferred to the baby. So you can actually pop out. I happen to have 3 kids that popped out just like that because all my boys are adopted. Came out already having experienced stress and trauma in their life the minute they popped out. So, you know, in those situations, it's a little bit harder, but what we have to remember is that it really travels through where you're coming from. It travels at a cellular level through your DNA, and then what you're experiencing around you and what your environment is, what you learn, and how that's imprinted on you as a child as well. You know, do you feel like your parents actually saw you? Do you feel like you were of value to your parents? Do you feel like your parents loved you? It starts right there. And then you head to school and a whole other disaster starts, right? Then the comparison starts. Then am I good enough? Are my grades good enough? I'm not reading fast enough. I can't do my math as good as the person sitting beside me. And it just keeps coming on us and coming on us. You have the odd person, the rare person who's at the top of their class, always getting the A's and so great, but you never know what else is happening in their life. Maybe they're not so good at soccer. Maybe their parents are abusive at home, or their parents ignore them, or their parents aren't home and they're being brought up by a nanny. Like there's so many factors that go into it. So it's really programmed into our brains. And this is what we have to remember about our brains is our brains are like a computer. And they remember things, and they remember things by a charge, and that charge is your emotions. So if something is very positive, you remember that positive emotion. It's implanted in your brain that way. It creates neural pathways in your brain that way, but it also goes for negative emotions. So even if you might not remember the exact circumstances, if you're repeatedly being told you're not good enough by your parents, let's say when you're younger, or by your brother, let's say your sibling, that happens all the time, you start to get these neural pathways in your brain that are connected, and they're charged by an emotion. So that's how your memory actually holds memories, because they're charged by an emotion. That's how we create the pathways in our brain consistently. So those pathways are already now being built, because from 0 to 6, those are your most elastic times for your brain, and when it's growing and learning and creating these pathways. And that's the complicated part too, because as much as we say, you know, you got to go on the inside to get through your fear, sometimes it's so programmed in our brain, it's such a hard step, but it's possible. And what we now know about our brains too is that they're elastic for our whole life. But that's when it takes the practice over and over and over again. And why people talk about mantras or, you know, self-talk. But what people have to remember is that you can't just stand in the mirror and say, I am beautiful. If it's not charged by an emotion, nothing happens, because that's how it was planted. It was charged by emotions. So when you're doing your I ams in the mirror to increase your self-worth, it has to be charged by a belief emotion that goes along with it. So it's kind of a combination of like neuroscience meets, you know, a soulful practice to actually change it at a multi-level in our bodies, and then knowing where it started and knowing how you can change it. So it's not that it's not possible. It's just complicated, and you have to be willing to do the work. And that's what we all say. You got to be willing to do the work, and you got to change that program, you know, that's happened in your life in your past, and then create a new program for yourself both mentally and from your heart moving forward.
And I like what you're saying. I don't know. I'll let you speak in a second, Falguni, because I know you probably have a lot to say right now. But to the point of the work, because I was gonna say that, but I'm glad you said that, because I think part of the thing, because I'm doing that myself this year too. It's like this whole like sort of rebirth thing that I'm doing, and I've been one who did the I am statements and the mantras without the feeling behind it and without the real belief behind it, and it did nothing, quite frankly. And so I also think part of the issue is too is that people think it's going to happen instantly. Like there's this sort of instant gratification kind of a thing, and they have to realize like it does it put you have to put in the work, and it also takes time. So what and it took time for that habit to form. It's going to take time for that habit to go away and to form a new habit too. So I think that's an important piece.
It's huge. And people think, the big marketing, thing out there is that you form a habit in 21 days. And it's actually not the truth. Research says that the average person, it's at least 66 days for the average new habit to form. And when we're talking about, things that are based on feelings of not being worthy, guarantee it's going to take a little more time than that, especially if it took 6 years to form between, whatever time frame that is in your life, and whether that was in a relationship in your teens or your younger years, or it was in your childhood, whatever that is. Falguni talks about this in her book, which is awesome. It's why it's called Blossom. She had to go through this herself to understand the patterns she had to change in her life and what had been set up for her from her parents, and it was part of her culture and part of her upbringing as well. But it was done without her realizing it until much later in life. And I think we all have those patterns that we can, we hope that one day we have our Oprah aha moment where we go, oh, that was it, that was where that came from. And those are the big breakthrough moments where you start to feel more free. When we talk about happiness a lot, I talk about happiness a lot because it's the world that I travel in, and that's happiness, right? That's freedom brings you that happiness. And when you get a little taste of that, happiness comes more easily because the world around you just starts to light up for you in different ways. But yeah, it takes work. Trust me. I did it, right? 365 days of giving. I understand a practice. So I'm not saying you got to practice 365 days a week or a year, but you know what? You might, because when it comes to being fearless, and I'm not sure there's any human being who's absolutely fearless at the end of the day, but practicing getting beyond your fear. I think that's more of it. Rather than being fearless, it's stepping through your fear every time it comes up. That takes practice. And just when you think you got it, you don't. And it will come up in another part of your life and in another day. So that's when you work at always stepping towards and into your fear, or into something that makes you uncomfortable, and you consistently and continually do that, it just gets easier is what it gets. But knowing you always have to step into your fear. There's an amazing new neuroscientist that I'm following, and his name is Dr. Huberman. Dr. Andrew Huberman, and he's a young, he's worth watching because he's really hot, neuroscientist out of Stanford. So he's just great. He's all over Instagram. He's like the hippest neuroscientist he ever met in his life. And they've now done science about stepping, literally moving with your entire body into fear. And they put VRs on people, and they figure out what their scariest thing they're most scared of. So let's say it's spiders. They're going to put you into a room full of spiders, and they teach you how to step into your fear. They've watched what happens to brains when they can get you to step towards the spiders rather than turn and run, right? Fear is all about fight or flight. I'm going to run the other direction because that's way easier. And that's what our nervous systems were built to do, was just run in the other direction. But when you can physically step towards it, that's when you start to reprogram your brain.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, actually, and it reminds me of a couple of things. So I have a few things to say here. One thing in taking a couple steps back, I think that the correlation between self-worth and fearless, or fear in itself, right, is something that that is man-made. The correlation that is man-made, right? We could definitely, these are two standalone entities that we bring together through the charge of the emotion that Jackie, you were talking about, right? So now, firstly, to disentangle, like, to just disentangle those two things is step number one, I would think. Like, when we are able to really understand that there is no pure association but for what we are associating it with. Like, for example, like spiders. Like, suppose I'm not afraid of spiders, and suppose you are. I mean, the fear is not in the spider in itself. It is how we are looking at it and how we are perceiving it to be, right? I mean, that fear of spider is real for you versus not for me, right? So understanding that fear in itself as an emotion is something that we charge and we, kind of associate with. It could be a person, it could be a thing, it could be whatever, right? And similarly for self-worth, right? There is actually, you could be doing, you could be believing yourself to be a certain way, or to be of a certain worth, but and still have fear. It's okay, right? I mean, I always say, like, when we talk about being fearless, it's about fearing less, like less amount of fear, right? You can't be, it's not the lack of fear, because there is no such thing of lack of fear, because new things will come around. You have never seen a different kind of a snake, and if it comes in front of you, you're going to be fearful. I mean, come on, right? So it's not
That's
about
our nervous system. Unless you get rid of your nervous system, that's just like,
correct. So you just start fearing less, because then you start believing in yourself more. Then you start making those associations and entanglements less, right? Because now you know that you want to face through things. I have a story to share with you guys. I was dead. I am saying was, which is a big achievement for me, by the way. I was very, very afraid of cockroaches, right? I I just can't stand them. They are yucky, but I was afraid of them. Right now, I don't like them. But at one point, I was fearful. Like, I was very, very afraid of them. I went through this program of, it's called an Art of Living program, where we had to face all of our fears, right? We did actually a program where we did meditation practices and this and that prior to the session, but in this particular session we didn't know. So they're like, so it was basically limit, like working with your limiting beliefs, like, what is it that you can work through, and how is it that you could rise above them, right? So the tutor, I remember, just simply coming and asking us, the class, like, so what do you not like to eat, because there are certain things that limit you in terms of, and it's about limiting. We associate those limitations with our capacity or capability, right? Which is again a wrong association, again a wrong entanglement. So so everybody's like, oh, I hate potato, I hate bitter gourd and this and that. So they're like, oh, really, you hate it? Go bring it, and then they have to eat it. All of that was okay, but when it came to cockroaches, they're like, and I made a certain face, because I was like, literally. So in the class of about 70 some kids, my face was so obvious somehow to the tutor that he called me on stage, and he's like, now you got to pick this cockroach. I was like, I will die, I will do whatever, but I have to run away from here. So long story short, at the end of the session, which took 3 hours, by the way, so the patience of the tutor and the patience of the class in itself, I built a strong connection with the class without even talking a single word that day, guys. You know why? Because they were all associated with me, because they understood that my fear was real. They understood that I am separate than this emotion that I'm experiencing so strongly, and that they are all helping me and cheering me on to overcome that. And I tell you, it was like the thing of the cockroach. I'm sorry, I don't want to get too graphic, but I had to hold the tentacle of the cockroach. I dropped it so many times, so that the head was going to come off, and the teacher goes like, if the head comes off, you have to pick the body, so you choose. So I was like, no. So anyway, I overcame the fear of it, and then we had to pass it on to the class, just because to overcome fear of everybody else as well. Then there's like, okay, who is going to throw it out now? So of all the class, everybody, I said, I will do it, and everybody started clapping. So I literally remember this incident. I mean, so much, it's so much charged with me now, with the act of bravery instead of the fear. It twisted, that whole thing turned around completely. And now I see a cockroach. I'm not irritated by it. I just don't like them, of course, but I'm not afraid of them. I think once we do certain things like what you were mentioning, Jackie, about, facing or walking through the fear, we realize that it is powerless. It was just our association. If we take the charge out of it, we take the power out of it, it's gone. So yeah, I just was reminded of this story. I wanted to share with you guys.
Does anybody know of Tracy Lit?
Yeah,
Any of
I
you?
know Tracy Lit.
Okay, so she actually does a talk, a TED talk on fear, and she
Oh,
talks about, Google it, it's amazing. It's like 15 minutes, but she does like, she actually at the end says about writing a letter to fear, and she like talks her letter, she talks about what her letter, but she says exactly what you both were just talking about, was walking through your fear, and how fear does kind of help us in a way, because Jacqueline, to your point, it's with the neural pathways and everything like that, so it's stopping us. So sometimes it could be stopping us from doing something that we shouldn't be doing for real, as opposed to, then, the other fear of, you know like, you have fear of cockroaches, to go back to the cockroach story. So yeah, she's been really good, and she actually has like an elevate thing. Actually, I'm very excited, we're doing whole 7-day coaching with her, my team and I. It's very exciting, but she talks about just that, the whole walking through the fear, the whole writing the letter to fear. And I did it, actually, I did write the letter to fear, and it did, when I was done, you kind of like, I did, because I need it. But like, I felt like, okay, like it was like almost like Jasmine was talking before. It was like almost like this calm comes over you and everything like that. But I think the point is, Jacqueline, you were saying earlier, to go back really early, about the action step. And that was the thing. You were like, oh my God, I have to write for 365 days. I just did a post about this too. And I know it's not 365 days, but it's 25 days of exercising and eating greens and sending out gratitude notes and personal development. But I do that anyway. So the personal development piece was easy. But like, I don't exercise, but I exercise 3 or 4 days a week. I give myself a couple of days off. So it seemed at the beginning like, holy crap, how the hell, like, what the hell did I say yes to? Like, voluntarily, by the way, to be perfectly transparent. And then, but I took the step and I made the plans, and I ended up, and it was like great. You know what I mean? It was something that you can accomplish. But can you speak to how do you, because there's probably people listening like, okay, that's great, you're saying to take the step, but like, how does one actually take that step? So what, is it a specific action, or is it just, what, you have to write, so just write? Like, what is it, just taking a piece of action?
Get off mute. You know what? It really is. So let's say you want to write a book. Perfect. Since Falguni has just done that, we all, or at least I have. I've been waiting for that like big download from the gods that just give me the words and they float onto the page and bravo, I have a book. That doesn't work for me. so if you want to be a writer, you got to sit down and write. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with a gentleman by the name of Neil Donald Walsh. He wrote the book series called The Conversations with God. He's got about 25 books out. He's a very famous world writer. Well, he's on Clubhouse now. And so every Wednesday I go in and listen, and I always ask a question. I get up on stage. I mean, when do you get to have a conversation with God, for God's sakes, right? So I'm on stage, I go, and a couple of weeks ago I had gotten up and I asked him that question. I'm like, how do you get over the being stuck? I'm like, how do you take that when you get stuck in something in your life? How do you move forward so that you're fulfilling your purpose here? And I said, and I use that example. I'm like it's like a book, how do you just sit down and you just do it? And he said to me, first of all, how dare you not? How dare you not? You have a story to share with the world. So this can apply for anything, whether it's a book, it's anything. How dare you not show up and be who you're truly supposed to be in this world? And that was the first thing that he said to me that I went, oh, he just got me on that one. How dare you not be brave enough to take that step? Because if you have something that's your gift to the world, how dare you hold it inside of you and not share it in whatever way that is? He said, and then commit 15 minutes. Sit down for 15 minutes every day and do it. So whether you're trying to write a book, you want to start a movement, You are trying to learn something new, whatever it is, 15 minutes every day. You'll have it done. Set your date. 15 minutes a day, you'll have it done. He made me set a date. So, and it was great. He's like, set a date, any date you want right now. And I've set a date for like my birthday next year. And he said, great, 15 minutes a day every day, you'll have done. You're good. So, I think that was the part that keeps replaying over and over in my head, is that if you have something that's important to do in this world that will serve your soul, who will serve your purpose, serve who you are in this world in whatever way that is. It doesn't have to be grand. You don't have to go start a charity like me. I don't highly recommend it, but you need to take that step because that's why you're here, right? And part of it is being brave enough to take that step. So take the little step, take 15 minutes a day and take that little step, whatever it is. If it's exercise for 15 minutes. You don't run a marathon the first time you go out running, right? You don't become a weightlifter the first time you lift a weight. But if you can schedule that 15 minutes every day, it gets easier and easier each day. And you've already booked that time aside. Listen, it's like meditation. If you need to meditate, right? Set the time, 15 minutes. Don't try to think you got to sit there for an hour and try and quiet your mind. 15 minutes. Do what you got to do to be mindful and present for 15 minutes. So when you do it in the little steps, if you need a visual calendar, do that. If you need to set a timer on or a calendar reminder, so you get the bing, it's like, oh, yeah, right now, this is my 15 minutes right now that I've booked out on my schedule to take my first step. You do that. And then tell people, because I truly believe that when we have things that we think about, when you think them, I don't tell many people that I want to write a book, or that I've been approached by book publishers to write a book, and I just haven't been able to get past my fear to do it. And so I've been telling people I'm writing a book. I'm writing a book. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm writing a book. And you have to say it, because then you got your tribe of people around you. Don't tell the people who are going to be like, oh, who are you kidding? You can't do that. You find, and even if it's one person in your life that you can tell that one person, and let them just be your cheerleader, so that you've now taken your thought that's stuck in your head, not to get past the fear. And words are action. So it's easy to think when we've all heard these kind of steps before, but all words is a vibration that comes out of our mouth. It's energy that is translated by our ears, right? So it's always that thing. If the tree falls in the forest, will anybody hear it? The answer is no, because there's no ears to translate the vibration of sound. So that clears that one up right there for everybody. If a tree falls in the forest, will you hear it? The answer is no. So, but it's like words. Words have a powerful energy with them. So when you start speaking the words, that's the first step. First, speak the words or write them down. That's another great one of doing it, right? Write them down. The words have energy, right? And then you're more brave to take the first step. And then you do it one day at a time. Check. Day 1 done. Check. Day 2 done. Check. Day 3 done. Right? And even if you get to the very end of your day and you missed your time, do it at the end of the day. Don't miss your day.
So the aha moment here that I've been tracking on is that whole mindset shift. So that question that he asked you, or he told you that you need to do this with your talent, that's one of the things that I share all the time with people that are stuck, is what's the best thing that can happen? Everyone won't get going because they're anticipating the worst. So once they get out of that mindset of this bad thing that's going to happen and start thinking about what's the best thing can happen if I do this thing, that's the trigger for them to move forward. And that's how you move forward, that fearless way, where the fear is less, the reward is greater. So you're going to get out there and you're going to jump in and do it.
And it's sometimes reframing it too, right? So I'm no longer writing a book for the world, which that's how I had started. Was I was trying to write a book that would be for everybody else. So I stopped writing my book for everybody else, and I'm writing my book for me now.
Yep.
And even if it never gets published, if I never share it with anybody, I'm good because I did it. And so I stopped writing for everybody else. I stopped writing for the approval of everybody else. Yeah. I stopped worrying about my grammar. I stopped worrying about, the perfect words and everything else. And now I'm writing for me so I can get the lesson for it of exactly what I need. And the lesson for me is I got to get past the fear and stop telling myself I'm not a writer. You know, and I could say the same thing about when I did my TED Talk. You know, same thing. If you don't think it's not scary, get up on a stage in front of 3,000 people and then putting it out to the world. You want fear? I was down on my knees in tears so many times.
Yeah.
You know, but when you find your voice, and we were talking about this earlier, when you get connected to your story and you get connected to who you truly are, and you can find the words to express that to the world, you're good. And that's all you have to do. But you have to find the truth in your story. You know, when I was doing that TED Talk, I had so many people telling me so many things I was supposed to say, kept telling me my story wasn't good enough. It wasn't big enough. It wasn't the right words. I wasn't connecting in the right way. And I finally had to walk away from everybody. And when I wrote my truth, and I wrote the truth of my story, and I shared it from a place of heart, and when I read the story and it made me cry, I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. Right? That's when the angels take it and they fly. And that's like everything in our life, right? When you can stand in your truth without trying to please everybody else and do what's right for you, and that's not easy. That's when you fly. And that's really the secret, is standing in your own truth without letting everybody else tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing, or what words you should or shouldn't be saying, and what's right for you. And it's tough. Listen, we all know it's tough, but all of these things that we're talking about take you one step closer to that. One step closer.
You know, as I have just recently put my book out there, I can tell you that the fear was real of judgment. But you know, I had to really think through and understand, what am I here to do? Like, the thing in hand, the book, for in this case, right? What purpose is it going to solve for me and for the world, right? I mean, I had to get into those real conversations and understand the real why behind everything that I'm doing. And so for me, the fact of, you know, really bringing out all my thoughts, my experiences, the learnings, whatever I had, to bring them all out in a book. Writing the book itself, so step number one, was extremely therapeutic, because now I am literally, you know, bringing it out there. And then to be able to hit publish and share it with the world is step number two. And again, that was scary, because now it's out for judgment, right? But you know what, I did that, and I gathered that courage because I didn't care.
Yeah.
Doesn't
And
matter.
that was it. Yeah. You let yourself free of that. Right?
I can't tell you how light I have been feeling. I cannot just tell you the joy. I mean, and you know, like, exactly, I could hear the charge in that. How dare you not? Like, really, now somebody.
And it was not right.
Now somebody, when they tell me, I'm like, exactly, how dare you not? Because you have a unique story to say, and it will not be said. I mean, can you imagine how big of a deal that is if it is not said by you, right? So you have to say that. And I really think that you know, Sri Ravi Shankari always says that fear is nothing but upside down love. I wanted to, like, I was not sure what it really meant until I let it marinate in my head and understand what it truly meant. And then I was like, that's right. Because when we are too much of, like, you know, why do we fear? Because we love ourselves so much that we don't want to hurt ourselves. We don't want to get anything that is, you know, going to cross that border or going to be hurtful to us, because that's what we are thinking. That's why we are afraid. You know, fear is just letting us, you know, stay away from all of that, and we just name it that. But so once I, in the case of the book, it was so obvious for me to really understand, do I love this enough to really hit that button? Do I love this enough to actually write that word? And when I started to do that process, that love is always higher than the fear. You know, if we look at, we have to continuously turn it upside down. You know, have to continuously let it be in a way where it is working for us. Let us understand what it is that is stopping us back, and truly, when we think about it, it will just be you know, the love that we have for ourselves. So the self-worth that we were talking about, right? It all comes from the fact that how much aware are we of our own potential, how much closer are we to our true self. Because once we are closer to our true self, we know it well enough that, you know, that fear become less and less, right? It will become fearless.
And Falguni, really, at the end of the day, now it's done. You know, would it be great if 1 million people read it? Absolutely.
Sure.
But if only one person reads it and one person learns something from it, which I obviously have. So your one person is already checked off your list. You know, and you touch just one person, wouldn't it be enough? If
Right.
you changed one person's life, and then
Yes.
you think of all of the people that they touch, they've done kind of the science on it, and that in your lifetime, one person usually touches, the average person usually touches about 100,000 people in their life, or 150,000 people in their life. And so if you can help change one person to show up happier, healthier, filled with more love, giving more love to the world, you haven't just touched one person, but you've touched every person that they touch in their lifetime.
Right.
So when you come to that in your life, whatever you're getting stuck on,
Yeah.
and you bring your true self to the table in whatever you're doing or wherever you're getting stuck, and you can step through that, you're never just touching one, but you're touching so many people that it ripples out to in the way that you do it best, because there are no two people. There's a reason our fingerprints are all different. No two people with any of the same experiences, any of the same lens. I don't care if you come from the same family, siblings, nobody. So we all have something that we can bring to the world. And it's really just our fear that sets us back and worried about what judgment we may or may not be in our world, and maybe on social media, maybe, you know, wherever it is, maybe at the workplace for you, it may be within your own family for that matter. You know, and it's hard. And I know there's people that are out there that are going to hear this saying, yeah, but you don't stand in my shoes. You're right. And you know what? I could have gone on about all the trauma I've lived in my life, and I got lots of it. I can check off every box anybody gives me, you know, and I can say, yeah, been there, done that, been there, done that. But you know what? That doesn't define me. My trauma doesn't define me. It doesn't own me.
Right.
It's not who I am, whether, you know, whatever it is. And I can talk about some pretty good horrors of my childhood. It's not who I am. You know, it's not who I am at the core of who I am. And I'm not going to let the trauma that I've experienced in my life own me or control me. You know, once we're done, once it's over and done, it's over and done. And that's our choice, what we let control us in our own head. I'm not saying trauma isn't big and it's not important and everything else, but we all have that choice on how it controls our life.
Right.
I know. I just need to speak to two things that you were saying that really resonated with me. Number one, when you were talking about if you affect one person, it's the same thing with the likes and the stat. You talk about social media. It just for a second, it doesn't matter if you get 400 likes. It doesn't. You don't know, because so many times I've written things and people have messaged me. Nobody's liked. Nobody. They've never liked. They've never commented, but it resonated with them in some way, shape, or form. So you legitimately never know who you're going to touch. I actually wrote down the how dare I not show up as who I'm supposed to be in the world on a post-it note. I'm going to put that in front of me. So thank you for that number. That's the second thing. And then the other thing is what you were talking about with the trauma is that's such a great point, because I played the victim card really well for a really long time. And even now I'm going through this thought process of, I affiliated myself with hard so many times. I go, I pushed through the hard. I got knocked down. I get knocked down, I get up again, kind of a thing. And I'm like, I kind of like lived there for a little bit again, even though 5.5 years ago I kind of stopped playing the victim card. And I was this whole week was wondering, am I doing that again? Like, yeah, I was like kind of thriving, not thriving in it, but I was like, kind of associating myself with it, if you will, and letting it define me, if you will. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. But I recognize that. And there's a book out there. And part of the reason why I recognize is the books that I've been reading, but there's a book out there, to your point, Jacqueline, about the trauma and the not letting it define you and all these things. It's called How to Do the Work by Dr. Nicole LaPerry. And I just read that with the book club of mine. And it talks about she went through all these traumas in life, and sometimes we get triggers. So even the self-worth thing and even the fearlessness thing, and from the 0 to 6, it's all the, you know what I mean? We may not remember it, but then somebody says something and it triggers us. And in the book, she talks about prompts and words and journaling and all these things that we can do to sort of like you just said, reconfigure our brains so that, even though we've lived through it, it's not, because I think that's the thing. It's like, oh my God, well, this happened to me, so therefore I am like this. and there you go. I'm fearful for this blank or whatever. Sometimes we don't even realize why we're fearful of it. You know what I mean?
And here's the big one. Who are you blaming?
Yeah.
Who are you putting it on, right? Who are
Yeah.
you blaming for your not enoughness?
Mm.
Because when we don't take ownership of it, we blame it on our parents. Like every parent gets blamed for every problem any child ever has in their life, right? So who are you blaming it on? You're blaming it on your husband. You're blaming it on your boyfriend. You're blaming it on your parents. You're blaming it on your kids. Like whatever it is, you're blaming it on your boss, right? We blame it on everybody. And you know, as soon as you're starting to do that blame game, done it for me, my poor husband, he gets blamed for everything. You know, when you start doing that blame game, you know, like that's your first indicator that you're not owning some part of yourself.
Yeah.
And that's a tough pill to swallow, especially in the heat of trauma or the heat of not a good relationship or a bad job or whatever. No choice, you know, it's everybody else's fault. You know, and those are the hard ones to work through. And it's not that you have to change your whole life. It's a matter of owning it, acknowledging it, being conscious of it, and recognizing again and again and again what's coming up, right? Because triggers come up again and again and again and again. And recognizing that. And if you can start naming your triggers and seeing it, and then get to a point where you're grateful for them, and when you can turn your triggers into gratitude for helping you grow and learn about yourself. And you can look at those down times, Caren, where I got kicked again, and you say, excellent, time to grow. Fantastic, thank you. Bring it on. This is my time to grow, right? And you turn that around. That's a feeling that you can be charged with. It's not easy, but it can be done, and people do it all the time. I've done it before myself, and it's like, excellent. I got to talk about fear today. Guess what? I got some fears to get over right now. So bring it on. Let's talk about it. You know, and that's how we work through it.
Right.
So that was brilliant, Caren.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's excellent. I think once we get closer to understanding what is it that we are capable of, and once we start seeing, in hindsight, the fears that we have overcome, like, no matter how many fears we have today, there have been certain fears that we have already overcome to be where we are at today. So just looking back at those and just gaining some, insights, just understanding that we have a 100% track record of overcoming the ones that we have already overcome. I think that itself will give us the energy and the power to keep going forth, to believe in ourselves, get a sense of elevated self-worth, so that we can then continue to, build upon that, that and take responsibility, as you guys were talking about earlier. Take responsibility of our actions, start owning it more and more, so that we can actually step through fear and experience less and less of fear in our life.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Hallelujah. We just went to church, ladies. Hallelujah.
Yes. No, I think this has been a fantastic conversation, Jackie. We could definitely go on and on. It's
We
just
could.
been such a breeze talking to you and talking about all these big things, which are like, if you implement even one thing, I think you gave away a lot of beautiful nuggets. Like,
Thank
how
you.
are you not is the big one. I'm going to quote that again and again, and I'm going to thank you every time for that, because it is important, right? I mean, how dare we not do it? And also remembering that it's okay to, not be fear free. The idea is to really accept it and really walk through it, rise
Mhm.
above it, right?
Yeah.
So
Can't run away from it. Fear doesn't go away,
it does not.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't. So it's
Yeah.
not something that goes away. It's just walking through it, right?
Yeah.
It's always going to come up. It's just, that's part of our DNA. And it's, people say sit and meditate, it'll just let it come up, release it. It's like, you know what? Don't release it. Walk around it, walk over it, go, and that propels you forward.
Yeah, take away the charge from it is what I say. It's
Exactly.
really
Perfect.
important.
Yeah.
Exactly. So exactly, like now those things, that cockroach still exists, but the fear does not. How amazing is that, right? So it is like, once you take away the charge from that particular association and just disentangle the whole thing, you're good. So that's what we mean by fearlessness. Less and less things of fearful entanglement is what I call it. So
I love it.
thank you. This has
It's
been
beautiful.
fabulous, Jackie. I am sure we could continue to talk to you, and we have a lot
We
more
all could. Yeah, we could go on for days, I'm sure. This
on
just
and
leads into
on.
more and more conversations. Okay, so I like to do one thing when I have these, especially these group chats before we go, and because of COVID, everybody can just rub their hands together a little bit. We're going to get a little energy going for everybody in the audience and just put them up to the screen. Thank you. My energy to your energy. I am so blessed to share this room with you. I am sending you love and light. Thank you for having me and making me brave to have a voice about a topic I've actually never talked about, because that's the healing right there. And it's the healing for myself as well. So thank you for that opportunity today. I feel so grateful and blessed.
Thank you. The pleasure is ours. We got healed by the conversation itself, so it's a mutual growing, experience. So thank you so much, and really appreciate you. Very kind. And we'll talk to you soon again, and we'll see you for a part 2 for sure.
Oh, for sure. Thank you, Jackie.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.